All right, in this video, I'm going to be going over the remediation best practices for post-test. We're winding down on the training. We're at the main portion of remediation steps. As a facilitator in TRAILS is a very important part with it being the post-test. This is basically the meat and potatoes of everything that we do. Pretest, as you well know, measure a student's knowledge of what they already know of a course, and based on their performance, they may or may not have to complete certain lessons in a unit. And if they score high enough, they may not have to take that unit at all. Okay. Likewise, in the post test, if the student did have to remediate a lot based on their pretest performance, post test is going to solidify specific areas where a student may need remediation. Okay. In almost all cases, you're going to know exactly when you go in. You're always going to know what areas that the student is struggling with on the post test, especially when they repeat the failures on a post test. You should see a pattern or some specific concepts or objectives in a specific lesson that you can use um, as remediation tools to laser focus that remediation for the student to help them be successful. In this case, we're back to student 130, and we are going to go into ninth Lit B. I'm again going to use that filter, student 130. You have your online indicator, as I always mentioned before. They're either going to communicate with you virtually if you're working virtually with them via email or Google Hangouts, etc. Or if they're in person, they're going to tell you, hey, I failed my post test. I need you to allow a retry for me. In any of those cases, you're going to go into the post testing question and you're going to know right away because you have the exclamation point that I mentioned in previous videos. That exclamation needs teacher intervention before the student can continue. In this case, you're going to go ahead and click on the Unit 8 post test, and you're going to notice a couple things right away. Number one, you're going to notice the student has taken this post test twice, and they failed both times. Now you scroll down a little bit, and you're going to see the objective mastery and bar graph in the graph form here, where you can see if it's green, that's a good thing. That means they passed it. You don't have to worry about it. It means they made it 80% or higher. If it's yellow or red, or if it's blank like this, blank, you can just clearly see they didn't make any progress at all. They got 0 out of 5 on Unit 8, Lesson 4 objective, okay? So they missed all 5 of those questions. They missed 2 out of the 5 in this one. They got 3 correct. And then the other ones, obviously, in Lesson 5, Lesson 3, and Lesson 1, they demonstrated enough mastery, especially in these two, in Lessons 3 and 5, that they got 100%. So in this case, remediation steps when it comes to the post test, you're going to view the lessons in question. This is going to be Lesson 2 and Lesson 4. Lesson 2, they only made a 60% mastery, meaning they only made 3 out of 5 questions correct, and they got no questions correct here. Now, this is a point where you're going to allow them a retry. You're going to want them to remediate. What you're going to say is you're going to go back into the lesson that you didn't demonstrate mastery on, which in this case is Lesson 2 and Lesson 4. You're going to spend 15 to 20 minutes in those lessons. Self-remediate, go back, double check your guided notes, double check the quizzes, look at everything you got there, make sure you're ready, and then I'll allow you a post-test retry. Okay? So all you need to do now is you need to go back to, again, this is Unit 8, Lesson 2, and Unit 8, Lesson 4. You need to allow retry on these. So what we do is we allow retry on those specific quizzes. This puts a little checks and balances in place where the student does have to go back in and retake those quizzes to make sure they have the knowledge to pass those particular questions again or that content again when they see it on the post test. And it also allows you time to remediate the student time to remediate, to double check their guided notes, make sure they're ready for that post test on that third attempt. Okay. Again, they failed it twice. They get 2 attempts. If they pass it by that second attempt, they keep working. They keep going. You don't hear from them until you're ready for the next pretest. Okay. But in this case, moving forward, every time they fail this post test, you're going to hear from them. They're going to tell you, I need you to allow a retry or remove the hold. I've got to attempt again. So on the third attempt, your remediation steps are to reassign those particular quizzes that they didn't demonstrate mastery in. Again, this is going to be lesson 2 and lesson 4 of unit 8. So we're going to go back up here and we're going to click on lesson 2 quiz, and we're going to click student retake. Okay. As you can see, the lesson 2 quiz now has that check mark. Then we're going to go over here to lesson 4 quiz, click on student retake, and there you go. From here, you just tell them that they have 15 to 20 minutes per lesson. That way they don't just go right back into that quiz and take that quiz and ready to take that post test within a minute or two. That's not how it works. This is another role that you have where you need to make sure that you're not just unlocking the quizzes, allowing retry and then letting them go right back into the post test. Don't do that. Let them have time to self remediate. Again, we want them to have 3 or more failures before you really get into true teacher intervention when it comes to this. Okay. Like I said, the first 2 attempts, those are what I would refer to as freebies. I get 2 attempts on a post test before teacher intervention is even warranted or asked for. Okay. At that point, that's why we refer back to the quizzes. The quizzes and lesson quizzes, the lessons and lesson quizzes are those teachable moments. That's where you really want to get a student to interact with you and ask questions. Okay. On the post test, again, 3 or more attempts is when the real teacher intervention comes into play. Okay. That's not to say that if they have a question after they fail the post test once or twice, that you can't help them clarify some of that stuff. But after a second attempt, you're not going to go in and do some of the other teacher interventions like going over the post test results with them. We're not doing that until the third or consecutive attempt failed after that. After 3 or more failed attempts is when you can start doing remediation by using the post test and going over the questions with them. And I will go over that here shortly. But again, after this being the second failed attempt, you got to get them to that third failed attempt before you apply any more deeper remediation. So you've done this part, allow them to remediate. In this case, I'm going to say anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes. They should be ready to the point where they're ready to take that post test. They will have taken these quizzes, all right, and then they will be ready to take that post test. At that point, when they are ready, you're going to go in and you're going to allow student retake at that point. So just to show you what this should look like, I'm going to go in here like this, and this is going to show you a little bit better to where you can see now that once you go back in after student says, I've remediated 20 to 30 minutes, I'm ready to take the post test again for that third attempt. That's when you'll go in here and you'll click on this, and then you'll allow the student retake. You don't do this ahead of time. You do the quiz retakes first. That way they're not just going right through there and going right into the post test. And then all of a sudden, teacher, I failed it a third time. No, this is one final check. You can say, you got any other questions before we open up this post test for a third time? Let me double check your notes, make sure you're good to go. At that point, that's when you're going to go into the post test, allow that student retake, confirm, and the retake is there. That's that unlock we're all familiar with. All right, if we go to the actual students page and I refresh this, now I can see that post test is ready to be taken again. Okay, hopefully on the third attempt they will take a little bit more time and get that correct and move forward. However, if they get to a point where they don't actually pass it on that third attempt, then I'm going to have some things I'm going to read here. I just want to make sure that this is very clear on this step. So this is after 3 or more consecutive failures, okay? So you already know how the remediation goes for a post test on that after that second attempt. So what it is I'm going to read this verbatim. Following the third test attempt and beyond, a teacher can implement any appropriate ethical remediation to help the student be successful, from going through the lessons with the student to conducting a mini lesson with the student on the content they are struggling with. Okay. At this point, it would be appropriate to go over the test with the student with the correct answers hidden. You can do this by going into the assessment in question in your teacher device and clicking the hide answer button uh, at the top of the assessment questions that are displayed. This will hide the correct answers if a student answered a question incorrectly. So I'm going to go ahead and use this this one here. If you scroll down, you're going to see where it says hide answers. If you click that, it's going to hide the answers. Now, obviously, if the student got the answer correct, it's not going to hide that because they got it correct. One of the things that we've always said, even back in the grad point days, is we're not going to punish a student for good behavior or for something they did positively. Okay, so in this case, it's okay for them to see what they got correct. That may get them to solidify that knowledge. That way, when they have to retake this thing again, they at least know they got that one correct. But when we get down to these questions that are incorrect, you're going to notice it doesn't tell you what the correct answer is. It just shows what they answered. So in this case, you can always have remediation in this. Again, this is the third attempt and beyond. You can ask them, what would you have put other than complete? What other answer would you have put there? And that way you can have that communication with them. You can always refer because right here it shows you Unit 8, Lesson 1. That's the lesson in particular they could go back to and revisit to solidify that knowledge for that particular objective. And that's how you would do that, okay? So again, once you have verified the student has completed the remediation and passed required lesson quizzes, you're going to reassign that post test again one more time. So back to it again. In the case of the third attempt and beyond, you're going to double check. I'm going to use this as an example. Once again, um, you're going to reassign the lessons that they didn't demonstrate mastery in. Okay. The idea is at the end of the day, hopefully after 2 attempts, the student will continue to be able to move forward, but there may be scenarios where they'll have 3 or more attempts, okay? After 4 or 5 failed attempts, you are free to communicate with your site principal. A student may have maybe SPED, maybe 504 IEP may have issues where they're not understanding the questions or et cetera. When you get into 4 to 5 to 6 failures, it's always good to get your site principal involved where if you have any questions, you can ask them. They may direct you in a position where they may want you to change the grade of something. After remediation, after again, I would recommend this is after 4 failed attempts or more. When you're getting into 5, 6, and 7 failed attempts, that's going to get to a point where a student's going to leave Mountain Ed and they're not going to want to come back. We've seen that happen a lot. So in those cases, see if the student really grasps the concept. Maybe read the question to them. Again, this is when we're getting into 5, 6, 7 failures. You are always welcome to change the grade. Just make sure when you're changing grades that you document why you did it. So I'm showing you this because I want to give you a little demo here of what to do when you change your grade, okay? So in this case, we're not going to assume that this is 2 attempts, but this is when we get to the point where we're at 5, 6, and 7 or greater failed attempts on a post test, at the point where the student's ready to leave, especially when they get to the point where they get a 76 out of 80. a 70 out of 80, even a 68. When you get to that point, after remediating with them and realizing, hey, student grasped the concept, they just didn't understand maybe the way the question was worded or how it was presented, you're always welcome to override the grade. Again, in these scenarios, when you put an alt grade in, you're going to want to document what you did. So in this case, I'm going to say after remediation on the sixth failure, gave credit for questions 1, 3, 12, and 18. Okay. I would also put verified with campus principal. Something of that nature. Mr. Holland gave me permission to modify the grade, same things of that nature. Obviously, as with day school, document, document, document. So make sure you're documenting what you're doing when you're making alternate grades or changing grades. Again, it needs to be justify what you're doing. You're not going to be making an alt grade or a change or a modification after 2 or 3 failures on a post test. Make sure that you're not doing that. Make sure that this is a situation where it's 5, 6, or 7 post test failures to the point where you can justify what you're doing. Okay. Keep that in mind. What you do, you're going to click override and you're going to notice it timestamps who did it. It puts Aaron Holland on there and it tells you exactly the note that I put. This is the kind of stuff we look for when we're going in and maybe a campus principal or someone else asks us to look into something. This is what we're going to be looking for. If there's any modifications to a grade in any way, shape, or form, make sure number 1 it's justified, number 2 it's documented. Okay, that's the biggest thing. Um, Central office is not out to get you. We're not out to. We're not on some kind of hunt. Uh, Most of the time, we're asked about these things to look into them. It's always good. Again, best practices: document what you do, why you do it, and who gave you permission to do it in whatever cases. Like I said, if you're getting to a point where a student's going to leave, we want to do the very best we can for our students. To close this video out, you're going to also notice that teacher activity is recorded. Everything you do for an assessment, when it comes down to it, is documented, okay? If you're doing any kind of grade overrides, if you're doing any kind of releasing of a hold on a pretest, on a post-test, if you're removing locks, if you're doing things out of sequence, the program records it. Please keep that in mind. The system is set up to work a certain way. It's prescriptive and it's in sequential order. So if you're removing holds and unlocking certain things, make sure there's a reason for you doing that. Okay. If you don't have a reason to do it, don't do it. That's the biggest thing I can tell you. This closes out the video on post-test remediation. Let me know if you have any questions.